A lot happening here in Kansas City across both of our state lines, and we haven't spent a ton of time on it, but it's starting to pick up some steam as we head into 2024, and that is the local congressional races. And as is always the case, the biggest congressional race to watch in this region is the 3rd District in Kansas. We know right now the Congresswoman has been Sharice Davids since 2018. And Republicans are trying to figure out a way to win that seat back. Kevin Yoder lost it in 18. Amanda Atkins lost it twice in 20 and 22. And now it's an open seat for the Republicans trying to figure out who's going to go up against Sharice Davids. Richard Hudson is in our studios, National Republican Congressional Committee Chairman. He joins us on KCMO 95.7 FM. Richard, good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Pete. Great to be here.
It's great to have you here. What brings you to town from North Carolina, by the way?
Well, Kansas 3, as you say, is our best pickup opportunity in America, and my job is to grow the House majority for Republicans, and so we're here to win this seat. And frankly, Dr. Prasanth Reddy is one of the most exciting candidates we have in America, so I'm here supporting him.
Now, why do you say that? There might be, and apparently there will be, some other folks jumping into the race. Why is he the guy that you think is ultimately the one who can win this seat back?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, we haven't had success here lately, and so we went back to the drawing board to find someone with a compelling life story that we think voters will take a second look at. And, you know, Dr. Reddy is the American dream. I mean, he represents it. He moved here from India at age 4 with his family. He's a oncology doc. He's someone who served his community for a long time, and after 9/11, he joined the military, and he served our country in the military. He's someone who I think has a compelling life story, and I think voters of all stripes, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated voters, will take a second look at Dr. Reddy and what he represents.
What would you say? I mean, you know, you've seen what's happened in this district here the last couple of cycles, and it has not been good. I mean, double-digit losses for the Republican candidate last couple of times around. You know, I, just for a little backstory here, the listeners will know this, but I made a bet that if Amanda Atkins could keep it to under 10 points, I would not have to run a naked lap around this building. I ended up running a naked lap because it was such a bad blowout.
Yikes.
I learned my. I know, you ain't kidding. Yikes is right. Ask Mark about that. Mark was following me around with the camera for the whole time, right?
Terrible.
Mark? Yeah, Mark's still got scars thinking about that. So how do you do that after, let's be honest, just the blowout losses the last 2 cycles here in this 3rd district?
Well, I think the people of this district want someone who's going to put their interests first, who's going to be a reasonable problem solver in Washington. And I think Sharice Davids, frankly, has fooled them into thinking she's that kind of representative. But she, frankly, is one of the most extreme Democrats in Washington. She votes with Joe Biden over 90% of the time. She votes with the squad over 87% of the time. She's someone who has a record as being for open borders, anti-police, anti-Israel. I mean, you know, I come from North Carolina. Our state motto is to be rather than to seem. Well, she seems to be the kind of voter this district wants, but the reality is she's an extreme leftist when you look at her voting record.
How do you cut through that? Because as you noted, the messaging and the way they branded her has been very moderate. A lot of us get all the emails, and it's a lot about bipartisan work on this, that, the next thing. So the voters have bought it hook, line, and sinker. How do you change that narrative?
Well, we have a saying at our committee that if you're going to tell lies about us, we're going to tell the truth about you. And so we happen to have facts on our side. We have her voting record, but we've got to do a good job of communicating that with the voters here in Kansas.
What is that going to take from the standpoint of, I mean, you know, Amanda Atkins had a pretty big war chest for a Republican here, and it just didn't come close to working. So what does that look like when you talk about grassroots marketing? How do you make that happen?
Well, the first thing is you got to have a right candidate, and that's why I think Dr. Reddy is the right candidate. He's someone who can appeal to conservatives. He can appeal to swing voters. I think he could even get Democrats to vote for him when they look at his record and his life story. And so you start with that quality candidate, then you got to build a strong campaign around them. You know, we're going to invest from the national level here to make sure that we build a strong campaign that communicates directly with voters, that turns out the vote. And you got to have the money to advertise. And you know, people have to hear Dr. Reddy's life story, but they've also got to hear the facts about Sharice Davids' extreme voting record.
Do you feel like, and you were not the chairman, and this is Richard Hudson, National Republican Congressional Committee Chairman, you weren't the chairman in 22. Do you feel, because I heard this complaint, that maybe the NRCC was not as involved in this race in 22 as some people wanted them to be? Do you expect a bigger role and a bigger involvement in this race in Kansas 3?
I do. Again, I think this is one of our best pickup opportunities in the whole country. And because of redistricting, Republicans and Democrats on the state level have gotten very sophisticated in drawing these districts. So there's less and less competitive districts. I mean, I think there's only about 30 or so Democrat districts that we have a shot at all across the country. So this one's real important. And so, Dr. Reddy's got to win this primary, and he's got to prove that he's a viable candidate, which I think he will, and then we'll invest heavily here.
How do you perceive the top of the ticket and the role of the presidential race playing a role in the down ballot race with this 3rd district?
I'm not sure there's going to be a huge presidential presence here. I don't think either Biden or Trump is going to spend a lot of money in this area advertising, and so it's really, it's a challenge for us because we got to go build out the ground game. We have to fund it, but I see that as an advantage too because we can build it the way we want, and we can make the focus this Kansas 3 race.
That's great. What about when you look at just these suburban districts like here in Kansas 3, where you have seen this shift from maybe moderate Republican right of center to now, in some cases, like here in the 3rd district, kind of moving left of center? Is that something you're seeing? We are seeing it around the country. How do you get some of these suburban districts back into the hands of Republicans and ones that have been lost here in the last couple of cycles?
Well, I think these suburban voters, again, are looking for a problem solver, looking for someone who's going to put their interest ahead of national party and shenanigans on the national level. They're looking for reasonable legislators, and I think we've got a great example here now of a Democrat who is an extreme left Democrat who votes with AOC in the squad over 80% of the time. And you've got a doctor, a cancer doc who joined the military after 9/11, whose family immigrated here when he was 4 years old. He's the American dream. I love the matchup, and I believe if the voters in this district understand who these two individuals are and what they stand for, we're going to win this seat.
Let's go back to 22. I know you weren't the chairman, but that red wave, of course, never transpired, and now the Republicans have I believe it's going to be a 1-seat advantage there in the House. So you've got your hands full trying to grow this majority during what has been a tough time in D.C. What's the broad goal here as you go into this key election cycle in this fall in 24?
Well, as I mentioned, it's a small battlefield. There's only 30 or so Democrat seats that I think we have a shot of taking. There's about 20 Republicans that we have to defend that are in tough seats. So there's not that many races in play as you look across the country. But I think this being a presidential election year helps Republicans. The turnout model helps us. A lot of our voters now aren't suburban, highly educated voters. They're folks who are less likely to turn out, but they do turn out in presidential election years. So I think the turnout model will be better for us. You look at somewhere like Michigan. In Michigan last time around, the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, spent $60 million. Her opponent, Tudor Dixon, spent $6 million. So a complete blowout. They had an abortion initiative on the ballot that drove Democrat turnout to the higher than it normally is in an off year. And we still barely lost a seat there against a heavily funded, very strong Democrat incumbent. Well, that incumbent is now running for Senate, so we have a R+2 open seat there that's very similar to Kansas 3. But think about what's going to happen in Michigan. Instead of Gretchen Whitmer running away with it, Donald Trump's going to win Michigan. And we've got a very strong Senate candidate in Michigan. And even if Donald Trump barely loses Michigan, it's still going to be a more favorable turnout for Republicans. And so if you just look at what a presidential year turnout looks like, it's better for us.
How about just early voting? I mean, I know that's been kind of a controversial thing for Republicans, but as far as I can tell, if that's the way the game's being played, you got to get people out to vote. Is that something that you're working on in terms of changing that narrative and saying just go vote as soon as you can when you're available and don't worry about voting day? I hate to say it, but if that's how the game is being played, you got to play the game.
Absolutely, Pete. I'm old-fashioned. I think Constitution says election day, not election 45 days, so I want to vote on election day.
Yeah.
But I've had to get over that.
Yeah.
Because come election day, Republicans are too far behind. And so what we're doing is we're working with the Senate committee and with the RNC on an initiative called Bank Your Vote. And we're telling people to go vote early, get your vote in the bank so you don't have to worry about it. And for Republicans who are very active in the party, the message is we don't want to spend resources turning you out on election day. So get your vote in so we can spend our resources going after the less likely voters.
That's a good way to spin it. Good way to put it. Richard Hudson, National Republican Congressional Committee Chairman, in from North Carolina. He's here today for Dr. Prasanth Reddy, who is looking to be the GOP nominee against Sharice Davids in Kansas 3. How do you compare Kansas City barbecue to North Carolina barbecue? That's what people want to know.
It's not a fair comparison. We're pork. You're steak. I mean,
fair enough.
It's not fair.
Fair enough.
No, I have to tell you, when Kevin Yoder was in Congress, he brought me some burnt ends from Kansas City, and it's maybe the best thing I'd ever eaten in my life. And I'm a huge fan. In fact, I'm gonna load up my cooler before I head to the airport and take some burnt ends home.
There you go. He's got his burnt ends lined up. You can text in on where you suggest that he goes. You got your steak last night, so you're all set. You're
Absolutely.
all good. All right. Very good stuff. Richard, thank you for being here in the studios. We appreciate it.
Anytime, Pete. Hope to come back.
We'll be back with Richard Hudson, National Republican Congressional Committee Chairman. Great to have him on KCMO Talk Radio.